Welcome to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, where we help business leaders and individual contributors with actionable insights to hit their number and figure out the nuances of truly operating a business globally today, squeezing the essence of the lessons learned from the planet's top tech leaders. This is your guide to joining the fast track to global market scaling.
Welcome, I'm Ross Lauder, your host from Single Focus Talent, and I'm joined by our non-exec director, John Quigley, today.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Today we are joined by Eugene Levin, Chief Strategy Officer and Corporate Development Officer at SEMrush. Now, this is a topic I'm particularly passionate about. They are the authority in online visibility. Lots of organizations talk about the thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of users that they have. They're able to boast 6 million users across 20 billion keywords, which is quite an accolade. So very excited to get into this topic. It's one I'm very passionate about, having worked at HubSpot and ran a marketing agency, in terms of how do you get yourself visible out there. So welcome to the show today, Eugene.
Thank you for inviting me.
Great. Well, look, let's get into a little bit about you so far. Where has your career taken you to where you are now? Take us through that journey and why you're so passionate about SEMrush, if you would.
So, yeah, I worked all my life in tech, but had to wear different hats, from engineering to sales and partnerships to being partner in VC firms. So did a lot of different things. The most recent part of my career before I joined SEMrush was primarily in venture capital. I used to be partnering 2 different firms. First one was focused on seed stage companies, and the second one was focused on late stage pre-IPO companies, in terms of geographies, primarily United States and Europe. So that's kind of in a nutshell my background. But I always like to say that some long time ago I used to write code, so that still makes me engineer, at least from my passion point of view.
Well, that's something I can relate to. I went to university and did computer science, where I learned to code as well. So I can certainly appreciate that perspective. I suppose what struck me about what you said there is that you worked in VC, and you've worked in seed stage and late stage pre-IPO, etc., where things get really exciting. So that for me would give you a keen insight in how to spot a rocket ship. So what is it that drove you? Like, let's talk about your VC career, and let's talk about what was it that you liked about that? What was it you looked for in companies? And then more specifically, in terms of SEMrush, what drove you to go there and see that potential, having all of this context and experience in VCs, knowing how to spot a winner, as it were?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think every VC has some sort of secret sauce. What we would do, and we primarily looked at consumer internet marketplaces, type of products that we could understand as a consumer. We didn't look at companies that require understanding of rocket science. So we looked at companies that we understood, and we primarily focused on things like unit economics, cohorts. So very, very sort of statistical approach. And we also tried to talk to almost every company in the vertical that we liked, and then collected information to make right decisions, having the knowledge. So that was kind of our approach. I think it works well for the firms that don't want to go into kind of high tech sectors. We invested this way in many very successful companies. In terms of SEMrush, the way I met guys was quite unusual. In general, I wanted to invest in their company, but they didn't want to take my money, which is, usually it's the opposite. But I think that was the first time I kind of realized this is very unique business. And also at the same time, when I was looking at all these consumer internet companies as an investor, I felt that they're extremely overpriced. Was the period when everyone was trying to build Uber for everything. So it was very hot market in terms of consumer marketplaces, but was also at the same time, inflated in terms of valuations. So I couldn't explain why, company X should be valued this way. And there was a period, of a couple months where we talked to a lot of companies, and I couldn't get myself excited with an opportunity just because of the price. I like the team, like the management, like the problem that they solve, but I just couldn't get get into the company because I didn't feel the valuation is right. And at the same time, I think SaaS experienced almost all-time low multiples. So I felt that, SaaS is fundamentally more interesting model than consumer internet marketplaces that we invested in. And we are paying kind of even higher multiples for inferior models. And I started looking at different SaaS companies. And yet again, I followed the same approach, invest in stuff that you at least understand from consumer point of view. And I used SEMrush myself for many years as a marketer, and then for due diligence in a VC firm. And I just, knew how to use it, understood the value proposition. And I have met founders a couple of years before that. So I knew the team. And I just started talking to them. We looked at their metrics. And I think it very quickly became obvious that this is, either the best or one of the best businesses that I've ever seen, from unit economics, P&L, profitability point of view. Growth was there as well. I just made them an offer, but they were so profitable, they didn't need my money back then. So as many investors, I just tried to stay in touch, be friendly, try to help with other things like introduce them to other people, help them with hires, help them with analytics frameworks. And then eventually we met one more time, and I gave them one more pitch about why they need to take my money. And they said they're still not interested in money, but they would like if I joined the company. So that's kind of how I ended up in SEMrush, which so far have been the most exciting journey I've ever had.
Wow, that's quite a story. And from my experience in the SaaS space, it's a rarity. In fact, it's probably the first I've heard of where normally you're having conversations about burn rate in the boardroom. You're talking about how it's all about market share, and profitability comes second, and even companies IPO before they're profitable as well, which is kind of counterintuitive. For a small business owner, it's all about profitability, and it's all about keep going, etc. Whereas if there's a money supply there and you can grow and get market share, you can turn the tap on later. I think what's really interesting about what you said was that you had that unique scenario where they were profitable and they weren't interested in additional investment. And you also then mentioned about the understanding of the product from a consumer perspective, making it a very simple and quantifiable thing. So I wouldn't disagree with that it's a very unique scenario. I suppose my question is, how would you articulate what SEMrush is to a consumer or to a small business owner or a medium or large business owner? Because you've got some household names on your books as well, but how would you capture that in a nutshell or an elevator pitch as to the value you bring to the table?
Well, ultimately, we help businesses to get attention of consumers across all major channels, be it search engine optimization or social media marketing or content marketing. And I think the big problem that we solve is that amount of information that we create increasing every day. There are more blog posts every day. There are more videos created every day than ever before. I'm not even talking about all the pictures on Instagram and so on. But at the same time, amount of attention, like number of eyeballs, is relatively stable. We already reached, at least Western society, reached level of online penetration where almost everyone is already online and they already spend as much time as they theoretically can online. So those numbers are not going to change, but at the same time, content is growing at an accelerating rate. So in this environment, when you have increasing number of people competing for a finite amount of attention, competition grows dramatically. And we help brands to navigate this environment and actually reach their potential customers. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
That's really cool and very well put. Thanks, Eugene. In terms of your role as, and congratulations, by the way, you're the very first Chief Strategy Officer we've had on the show. We've had bunches of other domains and roles. You're the very first one. And I know myself personally, that role is sometimes described as being responsible for nothing, but accountable for everything. So for our listeners, our own definition of the kind of Chief Strategy Officer role is someone that's responsible for developing, communicating, executing, and sustaining corporate strategic initiatives. So I'd imagine that you need to have, you know, the vision and the tools and frameworks of a strategist, really, but you also need good relationships with the leadership team and be a good thought partner as well. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, absolutely. Both parts. You know, the part about being responsible for nothing, but if something goes wrong, they blame you. Yeah, that's very true. And in terms of your description of what is the role, also very true. I think, you know, when I joined the company, I was literally one person team. So I was doing a lot of work, but primarily as individual contributor. Over time, I grew the team size. So right now we have also analytics team that reports to me, and we have a corporate development team that reports to me. But still, the amount of projects where I am involved goes way beyond that. So I have to be involved in most of product launches, which means I need to have, as you said, good relationships with product teams, with marketing teams, with sales teams. I like to think about my role kind of being on one side, this kind of big data analytics guy who collects all the available information to make right decisions, and then on the other side to be a glue that helps people to bond together and execute on the plan, because it doesn't matter how good plan is if you cannot execute it. And people execute plans, you know, not some strategic vision can execute itself.
Yeah, extremely accurate and from our experience. That's very succinctly put, actually. And yeah, I mean, you have that advisory kind of role where you're helping shape the strategy, and you're also, you know, a bit of a sentinel where you're trying to sense and interpret market shifts. And I'd imagine you're the kind of aide de camp for the CEO as well, on top of things. And you know, at times you're involved in driving deals and partnerships, etc. Let me ask you this, Eugene. Where are you spending most of your time right now on the business? You know, is it like M&A? Is it on the front line? Is it in biz dev? Is it with the board, with functional leaders, with partners, agencies? Where are you spending most of your time right now?
So right now I focus primarily on corporate development. So identifying list of potential acquisition targets and working on the deals. We actually closed one transaction earlier this year in September. So that where I spend a lot of my time. Also spend a lot of time building analytics frameworks internally, and also, you know, market research frameworks where we monitor what other people are doing, what features they have, you know, what is priority for us to have something like this. And I also spend a lot of time executing on things that we identified, let's say a year ago, as a potential growth driver, and now we already kind of have something to show the market. So that's kind of where I spend most of my time. But I think in general, where I want to spend most of my time is thinking, which is, I think, counterintuitive. But I think as company gets bigger, then me as individual contributor is just not going to be a lot. I can be better in many things than two people, but at some point it's just better to hire two people to do this work. But I think unique value that people in my role bring to organizations is ability to know more than any other person knows about business and the kind of surrounding market, and make decisions and think about those decisions. And that's where I kind of ultimately want to focus. Once I have kind of good lieutenants to handle all kind of day-to-day activities, I will be just focused on thinking and kind of making plans and building models. How we can continue growing, how we can launch new products and departments. So that's where I want to end up in future, but right now I'm not there. Right now I'm still doing a lot of kind of day-to-day operational work.
Got it. And we've spoken to a lot of software as a service. In fact, actually, we only speak to software as a service hypergrowth companies on this show, and in a lot of those most of those organizations, there's big personalities. So some have logical kind of perspectives, and some don't. Everyone has different timelines and agendas, and as I always like to say, everyone is a problem for someone else. So I'm wondering, how do you successfully navigate that at SEMrush, the people thing? Because you probably touch more people than anybody in the organization, apart from maybe the CEO. How do you successfully navigate that?
So that's a great question, and I think we are lucky that our CEO was thinking about the same problem for a very long time. And for us, the answer was that we need to maintain the whole company structure as flat as possible. And what it means is that if organization is relatively flat, you can have groups of people who have their own areas of responsibility. And within those areas of responsibility, they don't necessarily overlap with many other people. So there is not that much kind of communication that is like, they don't need to communicate too much outside of their own team to get results. So that's kind of initial idea. And we still, even though we're not as flat as we used to be, we still maintain very significant level of freedom and independence. And we draw the lines to explain people what their area of responsibility should be. And yet again, that have been very helpful for us. But I think even with this approach, at some point there will be collisions, and that's where managers have to step in and resolve potential conflicts. But also, it's about culture. So we also work a lot on culture where people kind of have to be tolerant to opinion of other people. And I think that makes it easier, when there are conflicts or collisions about how things should be done. Even if people disagree with each other, they will do it in a very respectful way. So everyone knows it's not really, anything personal. It's just, people have different thoughts depending on their background, where they're coming from, and information that they possess. And once they have a dialogue, once they can establish information exchange, it's much easier for them to get along and find the solution. So those are kind of two main things that we help, but I don't think that any organization is immune and doesn't have such problems. The question is just how frequently you have them and what are the consequences. And I think in our case, we have them not very frequently, and they never led to anything really big. So.
Yeah, it's spring, and thanks for that insight into your culture as well. I remember an old boss of mine used to have a phrase that warring princes equal a weak king, and he used to always say to me that, and I used to ask, well, if you have kind of a couple of guys or leaders kind of going at it or whatever, what do you do in those situations? And he said, well, what I try to do is I try to ensure that neither of them win. Because
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it was a good tip, and it's something that has served me well actually with my own kind of directors and managers as I went through my career, is that you can't have an outcome where one person is seen to win over the other person, and it's just as you quite rightly put, is that you create an environment where everybody feels they're heard and they're understood, and then somebody makes a decision. Yeah, we'll get into culture in a second. In terms of your customers, and I'm personally curious about this. Do you actually help, apart from the tools? I know you guys have gone from, initially when the company was founded in 2008, you went from 2 tools to like you've about 50 now, which is incredible, and do you guys actually help people create SEO strategies as well as kind of leveraging your tools? And if so, kind of how do you work with agencies as well? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we primarily focus on providing the product. We have certain services that are delivered through marketplace model. So which means we just connect people with each other, but we are not providing service ourselves. And for strategy, we primarily work with certified agencies. We actually launched a partner directory this year where our clients, if they need some help beyond just product, they can request some help from certified agencies in this directory. So
and is that, Eugene, because it's an opportunity that you actually find that model means that you sell more of your stuff, or is it because the actual users get much better value that sees their organizations being impacted in a better way, or is it both?
Yeah, this is primarily for clients to be successful.
Very good.
The good example is we have some customers who do keyword research, and it takes maybe 20-25 minutes to find good keywords for good blog post, but then it takes maybe a day, maybe more, to write a blog post, depending on who is this person, how much time do they have. And a lot of our customers, they're small business owners, they have to worry about many different things and not always have time to write a blog post. So they never actually make this step from 0 to 1, moving from keyword research to actually creating content. And as a result, they never achieve what they could have achieved in terms of online visibility. So for these people, makes a lot of sense to just order the article in our marketplace, and certified writers will deliver them content. They will make sure that this content is optimized for search engines, also well written, answers the statements that business owner wanted to have. And overall, I would say for average small business owner, it's just hard to write very high quality content without a lot of practice. but freelancers that we work with in marketplace, they do this every day, so for them it's much easier. And yet again, the final goal is to make our clients go from 0 to 1, to actually start doing things that they are not very likely to start doing on their own without extra help. And then with SEO strategy, I think we have the same approach. Some people can build their SEO strategy in-house, some people need help. So people who need help, yet again, we're happy to connect them with agencies. We are probably not in the business of doing this ourselves, yet again, primarily because a lot of our customers are agencies, and they would not like us to see doing they would not like to see us doing that.
So Eugene, I have a question, and you've really talked very articulately around data in my mind. So you mentioned a few times a little earlier about analytical frameworks and how you've put together analytical frameworks. And I had a leader of mine in the past say to me, "In God we trust," as is written on dollar bills, "but all others bring data." And I'm curious to know two things really. From a VC perspective, what analytical frameworks tell you that a business is healthy? And then number two is what data tells you that there's online potential for a business as well? So there's untapped opportunity that obviously your product can help deliver. I'm curious on that. I really want to dig into the data. Like if you were to give people advice on the data, the analytical frameworks, and then how they can capture opportunity, what advice would you be giving them?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I have a little bit different phrase, but when people come to the meeting, I always tell them that they should come with the data, because without data, it will be just conversation about opinions, and my opinion always wins. So that's, I think, in general, shows how important data is for decision-making process in any corporation, because without data, we will be just, arguing about opinions. And in those arguments, someone with higher title or higher authority will always win. There is no way for opinions from the bottom to reach the top if they're not backed up by data. Yet again, in SEMrush, culture is a little bit different, but I think in most of companies it works this way. So in general, when we look at data, there can be many different ways in which people can use, for example, our product to drive their decisions. I think primarily we show people where they should focus based on the market. I personally use a lot products like Keyword Gap to identify, for example, who competes with us in terms of paid and organic search, what keywords they're bidding on, and then I'll dig deeper and try to understand why we are not bidding on those keywords. And once I do analysis, frequently I realize there is no any particular reason why we are not bidding on these keywords. It's more like nobody thought about them. So that's, I think, one of the examples of how companies can monitor the market and identify good growth opportunities based on what other people do in their space. But I can talk about examples the whole day. That's kind of part of the job. So.
So I suppose a lot of people get involved in business because they feel that their product is better than anything else. And I know Steve Jobs has kind of written the book on this in that respect. But my kind of view on the world is that it's really about solving a problem for people. So I think for me, what SEMrush does is it actually figures out where there are problems and where you can potentially serve. So, your role as a business becomes how do you serve that market rather than I have the best product when there may not be a problem actually to solve. So I suppose my question is that given that you mentioned there's like a critical mass in terms of internet usage in users as being that not are growing to the same extent that they would have done 20 years ago, etc. In terms of global adoption of using the internet, where do you see real opportunity from a problem and a product perspective going forward, as we're in this kind of new world? Now, I know obviously we've got a pandemic behind us and all that kind of stuff, but where do you see opportunity online going forward?
Sorry, just to clarify, when you say opportunity, you mean for companies like SEMrush to build certain products to address specific problems, or opportunities for marketers who just want to reach their consumers?
So I suppose it's both, actually, and that's interesting that you clarify that point, because I was really primarily coming at it from a business perspective, in terms of high growth industries, etc. But I'm also curious to know about your perspective on where you're exploring additional opportunities and being able to serve your customer base and future customer base.
Yeah, I agree. Those things are kind of correlated, but there are also kind of nuances. For example, YouTube is absolutely amazing way to attract attention from customers. YouTube ads work great. YouTube organic content works great. It's getting a little bit harder, but it's still a great way to attract attention and reach out to consumers. However, in terms of products, if you look at all the market for, let's say, YouTube optimization, it's almost nothing comparing to search engine optimization market. And from this point of view, this is a great channel for people to do something, but it's not necessarily the most attractive thing for a SaaS company to build product for yet. The thing is that it will be much better market in 3-4 years from software point of view, when competition increases, when it becomes harder to build ranking content or content that is shared a lot organically. So one gets even more saturated to the level where text content and blog posts are saturated today. There will be more demand for tools, but right now it's just market is not really there. So I think that's a good example to show the difference between how businesses, MarTech businesses, see the opportunity and how marketers should think about the opportunity. But yeah, from marketing point of view, if you're in B2B space, YouTube is starting to be very good. LinkedIn, from my point of view, for a B2B company right now, #1 social media network. There is still some organic reach there. Audience is much better, than on Facebook in terms of how they behave. There is much less trolling, much less, I would say, non-business conversations. So yeah, LinkedIn is great. Some people starting doing TikTok, which is, for me, probably too early for marketers, but potentially can be interesting. And then, in terms of overall direction, I think content is still the most interesting thing, and all the things that I've mentioned before, they're just distribution channels. But figuring out what would be the content for the audience, I think is still kind of centerpiece of what people can do. And then once you have good content for the right audience, then everything else is just a distribution, which you can figure out how to do. But I think understanding what people want to consume is going to be only harder moving forward, yet again, as I said, because content is getting even more saturated than it ever was. So, and that's, by the way, that's also where tools can help. So, for example, by doing keyword research, people can identify very specific narrow niches for their very specific target audience. Yeah, hope it provides more color.
Yeah, definitely. And you've hit on something there in terms of the niche markets as a strategy. It seems to be something that might be very prevalent. Do you think that we're seeing the kind of decline and hopefully, and this is my own personal opinion, the kind of death of the influencer? What's your own view on that? You think that's going to start to decline now, kind of influencer marketing, that, although there is, there's a lot of reach, there's not much depth, and the conversion rates are extremely poor for a lot of influencers? What do you think?
I think it really depends on the type of business.
Mm-hmm.
I think for some businesses, it's still going to be very, very good channel. I know a lot of people in beauty space who got a little bit disappointed. My thoughts are that it was sort of overhyped. People had extremely high expectations. We have been doing influencer marketing long before it became mainstream. For us, it worked extremely well at the beginning, and then it started to work not as well as many other channels. So I think right now for most of places, influencer marketing is going to be good in terms of just having more kind of noise and conversations around the brand, just increasing overall visibility. It's not necessarily going to be very efficient in terms of ability to drive attributable conversions. That's kind of my outlook, but could be very different for different industries.
Very good. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. You recently appeared in another podcast I listened to, and you were talking about areas where humans are still much better than AI. I know a bunch of areas where that still remains to be true, and also how searchable audio is going to impact podcasting. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by searchable audio impacting podcasting? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I was curious around it.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
The idea is that right now, when you search internet, you search primarily text content.
Right.
Sometimes Google can say, well, this video thing seems to be close to what you're searching for, so that's why we'll highlight this video. But they're not really analyzing the whole content of video to make this conclusion. They're more looking into the context where this video was, let's say, embedded, and so on.
And probably the title as well. That's probably
title and those things. But they're not like transcribing the whole thing right now. But eventually, when computing power gets cheaper, they will start analyzing the whole content. They'll probably start with podcasts. They actually already started. And once you have the full transcript, then people can Google things like, what did Eugene said about, let's say, role of strategy in SaaS, and then Google will look at index podcasts and find whatever I said, and they could highlight it, or they could just say, well, this starts at 15th minute of this podcast, and people can jump straight to the answer where we discuss the importance of strategy. So that's kind of what I mean. And I think once podcasts start getting more into search results, that could materially increase the reach of the podcasts. And I would think about this from distribution point of view. Right now, podcasts are primarily limited to discovery mechanisms. Like, someone needs to somehow learn about your podcast and and then maybe subscribe and continue listening to other podcasts, or maybe
unless you proactively market it like we do, so we have a
Yeah.
bit of an outbound kind of strategy on our podcast.
Exactly. Or sometimes maybe you have a good guests and
Yes.
they share this, and that helps to reach more people. So there are ways to do this, but it's primarily discovery. So I think
how are you going to be found is the question, isn't it? With yeah, exactly. I get where you're coming from on that.
Yeah.
How are you going to be found? And if you are, how will you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think for blogging industry, having sophisticated search engine was extremely helpful and helped people to create a lot of good content. But before this was possible, I think blogging was not that popular, primarily because there was no this kind of one more distribution channel based on search.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. So we've gleaned an awful lot around your role, and it seems like you help SEM Rush answer a lot of questions, like what's our winning aspiration, and where will we play, and how will we win, and what capabilities must be in place, what management processes and systems are required, etc. And that takes a lot of skill, a lot of experience, to be able to stimulate that kind of thinking and that kind of approach, and to facilitate that kind of conversation. So we always ask people on the show, Eugene, what's their superpower? And I'd like to ask you the same question. I'm sure you've many, but if I was to ask you specifically what you feel your superpower is, what you bring to the game, what would your answer be?
Yeah. When I think about what is the role of senior executive in a big company, then I usually come to a conclusion that the job is ultimately just to make very few very important decisions. It's not like I have to do like 20, 30 decisions every day. We have other people to do that, but when I make decisions, they have to be, relatively important decisions. Otherwise, I'm wasting companies' resources. So in terms of superpower, I think my ability to make decisions is unique in a way that I have access to more information than most of people. I also have more time to consume and analyze this information. And as a result, when I make decisions, I'll probably have highest percentage of right decisions versus wrong decisions. And I think that's the superpower that, in general is required for kind of senior leadership roles. It's not about, how many lines of code I can write or how many calls I can do. It's more about what is the quality of decision-making process and what is the percentage of right decisions versus wrong decisions. Everyone is going to make mistakes, except people who don't do anything. So I will make mistakes too, but my percentage of right decisions will be higher than for most of other people.
I think what you said there is crucial in terms of the willingness to make the decision. And a lot of people are just too paralyzed by lots of different factors like data, like worrying about pissing people off or whatever. But the fact that you're willing to make a decision, and if you're wrong, do you know what? You're going to find out pretty quick. But the fact that you're willing to make the decision, I think, is the difference that makes the difference. And one of the things that struck me, you said a little bit earlier, was around the culture in SEMrush is a little bit different. And I'm curious to know, what does that culture look like? And for you, what is it you believe in as a set of core values that, as we wrap up here, you want our listeners to walk away with in terms of how you set the tone for culture, if you could share?
Well, I'm much less involved in culture than our CEO, but to the degree that I'm involved, we focus on couple big things. that we require sort of from all employees. The first one is growth mindset. So we wanted people to be in a mindset where they have an internal desire to grow all the time, to be better at something tomorrow comparing to what you can do today. So that's kind of very important for us, and you know, we have a lot of interview questions about that. We also promote this type of culture internally, you know, after people join. So that's very important for us, just to have people who have internal desire to be better, to improve, to grow, and so on. So the second one is about communications. In the situation where you have a lot of freedom and autonomy, it's inevitable that sometimes people will disagree, and sometimes people will do wrong things. And what we tell is that it's very important to provide feedback. Good feedback, bad feedback, doesn't really matter that much. It's just very important to tell people how you feel about their work. And if it's a bad feedback, negative feedback, then it should be delivered in a way that will ensure that people don't feel this is something personal, and they will see that the only purpose is to help them grow. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we encourage, the culture of high quality feedback. So type of feedback that you can use to grow, not type of the feedback that will make people feel bad. And yeah, for me, it's super important, because if I don't provide feedback to people, I feel that I'm not doing my job right, because I don't give them opportunity to grow. I rob them, and you know, just because it was for example, the good situation, a lot of people feel uncomfortable when they need to deliver negative feedback, and they just try to avoid those situations. So when I think about this, if I find myself in such situation, I think I'm not doing my job well, because without this feedback, people would not be able to grow. And even if it's uncomfortable for me to, you know, tell them things like they are, I have to do that. And that's type of the culture that we encourage. But at the same time, people, you know, after they hear feedback, they should not think that that was, you know, worst day of their life and whatever. It's also my job to make sure that people understand where I'm coming from, and that's not personal, and that, you know, next time they do things better, and they will hear encouragement instead of negative feedback. And the same thing, as I said before, only people who don't do anything don't make mistakes. So mistakes are just, you know, one of the ways to collect information. And it's important to explain people that they should not feel bad about mistakes. They happen, and we move forward. But the important part is to learn from them. So that's the second big part of what we require from people. And the third one is we want people to aim for perfection, but at the same time, we explain that you know, it's okay to test things. So, and it's very kind of contradicting approach, but what it means is that it's okay to start with something that is not perfect and test things, but your goal always have to be to build something that is nearly perfect. I think about this, you know, in terms of, you know, if I show my first iteration to, you know, let's say Steve Jobs, which is not possible now, but I have kind of virtual Steve Jobs in my head. And if I show this thing to Steve Jobs, would he be, you know, okay with it? And it's okay if this internal perfectionist doesn't agree with you on the first iteration, but there have to be vision at the end that satisfies this kind of internal perfectionist. So that's kind of type of the mindset that we also want to see in people. They need to have vision of something that is near perfect when they work on different projects.
I think that's probably the most well-rounded answer I've ever heard in relation to culture thus far in this show. That's fantastic. And I think what that could be summarized as is personal accountability at every level. And, you know, you really want folks who you can work with on a regular basis that are open to change, open to the fact that it might be their fault, but also striving for the best. So that for me is a tremendous answer and really, really valuable.
I wrote that down, Ross. Yeah, so for our listeners, again, in case you missed it, what I wrote down here is fabulous phrase as far as I'm concerned. I rob you of an opportunity to grow if I do not give you my feedback, even if it's difficult for me to do that.
Yeah. So I think our listeners are going to get tremendous value from that particular segment, but moreover from your entire appearance today, Eugene. So I really, for myself and John, really want to thank you for your contribution today. And we look forward to having you upon the show again in the future, if you will.
Thank you. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. We'll be happy to do this one more time.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much, Eugene. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, designed for both established and aspiring career-focused tech rock stars, as well as helping leadership figure out how to speak global in today's multicultural world. For further details, check out sf-talent.com.